The average large corporation or government entity has probably thrown more money down the drain than most of us will ever see in our lifetimes. Whether they're trying to fix a problem nobody has, trying to sell a product nobody wants, or getting investors to jump on board a poorly thought out plan, the amount of money that can be thrown down the tubes in pursuit of nothing worthwhile can be truly shocking. From entertainment to technology to the military, here are the most expensive failures ever. The wildly innovative 1999 video game Shenmue had the misfortune of being released on the equally innovative Sega Dreamcast, which was one of the biggest console flops ever despite being a top-notch system. Shenmue had several features that were unheard of in 1999, including a vast open-world environment, day and night features and variable weather, interactive objects and non-player characters, and minigames. The game's slow pace and attention to detail divided players, and it's just as likely to show up on a greatest games of all time list as it is to appear on lists like this one. Despite having a strong fan base, the game was a dismal commercial failure, one of the biggest ever in an industry which produced such legendary flops as Atari's E.T., a game so bad it helped to tank the entire industry. Shenmue reportedly lost as much as $70 million, which translates to about $100 million in today's dollars when inflation is accounted for. But thanks to the game's fanatical fan base, its legacy will live on. A sequel for Windows and PlayStation 4 broke several crowdfunding records in 2015, ending up collecting $6.6 million from over 73,000 contributors across multiple crowdfunding platforms. Its Kickstarter campaign alone was the 6th most funded of all time, and gamers are eagerly awaiting its release later this year. In Hollywood circles, Heaven's Gate is synonymous with critical and commercial catastrophe. Its director Michael Cimino was coming off Oscar-winning success with 1978's The Deer Hunter and was given free rein to make the movie of his dreams. Unfortunately, the movie of his dreams was a plodding 4-hour epic about land squabbles in 1890s Wyoming that bored audiences to tears. Despite a stellar cast including Christopher Walken, Jeff Bridges, and Isabelle Huppert, the story was a painfully confusing, unengaging mess that inspired some of the most vicious critical barbs of all time. New York Times reviewer Vincent Canby called it an unqualified disaster, opining that Cimino had sold his soul to the devil to make The Deer Hunter and was now paying up. The great and famously witty Roger Ebert said, "This movie is $36 million thrown to the winds. It is the most scandalous cinematic waste I have ever seen. And remember, I've seen Paint Your Wagon." However, he had the figure slightly wrong. The film's final budget was a then astonishing $44 million, over 4 times its original budget, on which it only made back a paltry $1.3 million. United Artists took a loss of nearly $43 million, around $127 million in today's dollars, which contributed to the demise of the studio just a few years later. It may seem crazy that an upstart professional football league could ever try to compete with the NFL, but in 1983, that's exactly what happened. The United States Football League, or USFL, began play that season with 12 teams, playing in the spring so that football fans would have something to watch. But as you might expect, things quickly went wrong. From the beginning, teams were plagued by financial mismanagement. The USFL had no salary cap, and some teams were able to acquire star players, but it cost them, and some payrolls quickly spiraled out of control. The NFL also caused problems for some teams when negotiating stadium leases, causing some to settle for inferior venues or move to new cities. After the league's 3rd season, New Jersey Generals owner Donald Trump convinced the rest of the owners to move to a fall schedule to compete against the NFL directly, and also to file an antitrust lawsuit against the established league. The court ruled that the NFL had indeed established a monopoly, but shockingly awarded the USFL only $1 as compensation, which under antitrust laws was tripled to $3. The decision devastated the already reeling league, and a 4th season was never played. All told, the venture lost $163 million, nearly $1/3 billion in today's money. Las Vegas debuted its City Center Resort Complex in 2009, an $8.5 billion venture meant to update the Las Vegas Strip. At its entrance was the $400 million Harmon Hotel, a striking structure with a facade of blue glass that was to be its crown jewel. But the magnificent hotel never saw a day of business, and it never will. It's completely gone now, along with the truckloads of cash required for its construction and demolition. The hotel suffered from problems with its construction from the very start, as misplaced rebar within 15 of its floors weakened the entire structure. A plan to revise the number of floors from 47 to 28 as a result didn't work out, after a structural engineering firm found over 7,000 defects which would have to be corrected. A court subsequently ruled that the building could not be salvaged, was a threat to public safety, and would have to come down. Traditional demolition with explosives weren't an option, as the structure was too close to other shops and businesses, so it had to be dismantled floor by floor and piece by piece. Lots of people lose their shirts in Vegas, but losing a $400 million tower is another story altogether. Premier smokeless cigarettes were the bright idea of the R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company, and have gone down in history as one of the most notorious marketing failures in history. Introduced in 1988, the so-called cigarettes were odd contraptions that you still had to light, but which produced no smoke, so theoretically they wouldn't bother those around you. Among the many problems with the product was the fact that those most bothered by cigarette smoke are non-smokers, which were not exactly the intended target audience. They were difficult and awkward to use, and R.J. Reynolds' own president proclaimed after trying one that the taste left a little to be desired, using language which we can't repeat here. Compounding these problems was a persistent rumor that the devices worked better for using crack cocaine than anything else, and a marketing campaign that made it clear that the manufacturers had no idea who this product was supposed to be for. R.J. Reynolds blew $325 million on one of the worst ideas ever, about $600 million in today's dollars. For years, urban explorers could visit a site unlike any other just outside of Beijing, China. Wonderland was going to be the largest theme park in all of Asia, a sprawling Disneyland knockoff covering 120 acres. Construction took place throughout the 90s, and actually got quite far before it was stopped in 1998 due to problems with the construction firms involved with the project. The Ghost Park, which never saw a single paying visitor, sat nearly unattended for the next 15 years. Only thrill seekers and the curious would set foot inside, armed with video cameras to document the intense creepiness of the overgrowing, abandoned Wonderland. Talks of an attempt to finish construction in 2008 fizzled out, and all of the structures were finally torn down in 2013. There is no official estimate of just how much cash was sunk into the project, but considering its size and scope, and the construction costs of comparable parks such as Disneyland Tokyo, which cost the equivalent of $1.6 billion in 1983, it's safe to say that it was a lot. The United States military had to make an appearance or two on a list like this one. In 2006, the Air Force decided that it needed to modernize its software, and its plan was to tweak commercial, off-the-shelf software from Oracle to suit its needs. The initiative, called the Expeditionary Support Combat System, would have managed all of the Air Force's logistics and would have constituted a major overhaul of a system used by more than 250,000 employees. But things went predictably wrong. Management problems abounded, with the key issue being a lack of one single accountable manager to oversee the project as a whole. The entire system had to be broken down and restarted from scratch 3 times in 3 consecutive years. And after 6 years of development, the Air Force had absolutely nothing to show for their investment of time and money. In 2012, an analysis determined that it would take another $1 billion just to achieve a quarter of the capabilities that had originally been planned for the upgrade, and it wouldn't even be ready for deployment until 2020. With $1 billion already having been wasted, the entire program was flushed down the drain. In the 1970s, at the advent of home video, Sony engaged in a format war with nearly everyone else, believing in the superiority of their Betamax format over VHS. We all know how that turned out, as Betamax became cultural shorthand for failed format. But in 2006, another format war started to heat up, and this time Sony would come out the winner in short order. DVDs, which can only display standard format, was quickly becoming passé in favor of high-definition video. Toshiba's HD DVD was poised to square off against Sony's Blu-ray, with each company having a roughly equal number of backers in the form of major movie studios. But a funny thing happened as the competition was supposed to take off. It never did. Although the formats were technically equal, HD DVD simply never caught on in the minds of consumers, and over the course of 2 years, more and more retailers gravitated toward Blu-ray. The final nail in the coffin came when Walmart announced it would no longer carry HD DVDs in favor of Blu-ray, and in 2008, Toshiba announced they would no longer manufacture HD DVDs. Industry analysts estimate that in that short time, Toshiba lost a cool $1 billion throwing their support behind the doomed format. The Ford Edsel, which was only produced for 3 model years, is almost certainly the single greatest commercial failure of all time. It was a stunning miscalculation by the beloved automaker, and absolute proof that market research can only take you so far. Ford became a public company in 1956 and began making plans to produce vehicles based on current market trends. Their experimental vehicle became the most heavily market researched consumer product to date, and during its development, Ford would routinely tell the press that they absolutely knew, based on their extensive research, that demand for the new vehicle would be unprecedented and that the public would absolutely love it. A year-long teaser marketing campaign counted down to the vehicle's release on E-Day, September 4th, 1957, when it debuted to an extremely confused public. Perhaps due to being too extensively workshopped, the vehicle was found to be poorly styled and oddly conceived, and worse, it had a clunky name. Also, it shared many mechanical and engineering features with other Ford models, despite the company's promise of a new type of car, a hype which it utterly failed to live up to. All told, Ford spent $250 million rolling out the ill-fated line, an amount which translates to a staggering $2 billion in today's money. Once again, the military is no stranger to wasteful spending. One U.S. Army project introduced in 2003 was so wide and ambitious in its scope and yet so misguided in its assessment of future conflicts that its financial losses makes the Air Force's software snafu look meager in comparison. The initiative was called Future Combat Systems, and it was to involve an array of new light networked combat vehicles that could swarm the battlefield, responding to enemy maneuvers in real time and effectively outthinking any opponent. You may see where the problems arose. The program had to undergo constant restructuring as America's military targets refused to comply with its vision for the battlefield of the future. Rather than large-scale conflicts between armies, U.S. military actions increasingly called for combat with smaller groups of insurgents and terrorists who use unpredictable means to achieve their objectives. After 6 years of development, an oddly common amount of time for realizing that your massive project is going nowhere, the Army decided to pull the plug on the whole endeavor and rethink the assessment of the future of combat. During a time period that included highlights such as Hurricane Katrina and the housing crisis, it seems like there may have been better ways to spend $19 billion.